Welcome back, Barry Edwards, for the afternoon. We are joined by a friend, and I think I'm going to predict a fairly easy victory. I shouldn't say that. That'll jinx it, but I think a 5 to 6 point victory at least, which in politics these days is pretty strong. Her name is Kimberly Overman. She is running for the county commission at large in Hillsborough County, which means she's running in a 1.3 million county, which is a big undertaking. She's a financial planner, so she understands budgets and she understands money and she understands regulation. She's been on organizations as the Citizen Advisory Committee member for the Hillsborough MPO, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And if anybody has heard me talk about Hillsborough County, we definitely have a transit problem over there. She's been on the Tampa Budget and Finance Citizens Advisory Committee, chairman of that. She's been on the Hillsborough County Finance Authority as a chair. She's been board members of Seniors in Service, Communities and Schools, ACLU, League of Women Voters, tons and tons of other things. But she's been chairs of major government advisory boards. And now she's taking it to the next level. So I want to welcome Kimberly Overman. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine, Barry. It's good to hear you.
And one of the things we've talked about offline is Hillsborough County is a great place to live. Tampa Bay is a great place to live, but we do have some challenges. One of our challenges is, as you know, I'm not a tax and spender. I don't think we should throw money at things. I think we need to spend money wisely on things. We have the lowest per capita spending in government in Tampa or in Florida in our state's history now. Our schools are underfunded, and if you just go across the bridge or on 275, anytime during the day, it's like a parking lot. There's two taxes that are going to be on the ballot. Normally, we probably wouldn't support them, but I think I've done some polling and other people have done some polling. There are 2-to-1 margins now, 66% for the 1 penny sales tax increase on transit and the half-cent for education. Why has there been such a sea change in your county, where you've lived for 34 years, supporting these? Is it just out of desperation, or are people waking up, or why all of a sudden are people saying we need more services and better transportation and better education?
Well, there comes a point where you just have to invest in your own foundation. And as a financial planner, when I work with individuals, helping them manage their finances, we look for ways that we can spend our money wisely and invest in it wisely. And Hillsborough County has been talking a good game about investing in our transit and transportation. As I have described, I moved here from the Washington, D.C. area where I had public transportation, and I saw the value of what that brought to families that are looking to take care of themselves. I saw the value of being able to invest in that to grow an economy, and I saw the value of being able to invest in that in such a way that we were able to actually expand our economic opportunity, because that's what large companies are looking for when they're considering what they need to have for the quality of life of their employees when they live in a community. And while Florida is just wonderful, we live in paradise, right? Well, we can't keep promising that we're going to do something about our transportation challenges and not do anything about it. Now we've got about a 20 to 30-year backlog of transportation-related projects that are in the works. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on plans to put transit in place and to put better roads in place and put safer streets in place, but we've yet to actually move the needle. And with our current tax situation, our current revenue situation when it comes to homestead and other taxes that we use to supplement the needs of the services that the county provides, we're in a shortfall situation where I think citizens recognize that in order to get something done, it's going to take more than what we've been doing in the past. And I think that maybe they may be willing to pay for it. This sales tax referendum for both transit as well as, safer streets and better roads and crosswalks and sidewalks, which is what the transportation tax looks to pay for, in addition to beefing up a funding for our heart. We just have to. We have the lowest spend per capita in the country. on transit, and you can't expect to run a functional transit organization when you don't have the resources to make it work.
And we were talking about offline, Jeffrey Immelt saying why he didn't even consider Tampa. We also aren't we of the metropolitan areas like this the worst rated the worst transit in the country now in Tampa, or one of the
easily. And given what they have to work with, they do a pretty good job. But you can't expect to have a racehorse if you don't have the horse. And so the good news is that if the taxpayers decide they want to, tax themselves in order to improve the quality of life that our workers and our families have by investing in transit as an alternative transportation method, and to take some cars off the road to address our congestion problems. Not everybody's going to get out of their car.
Right.
That's foolishness. But if you have an alternative, you don't lose your job when they only have one car.
Right.
You have the ability to still sustain your family. You have the ability to be able to stop driving when you may be up in years where you don't really want to drive. And for those competitive companies that are hiring young individuals in all of our major cities across the country, what they've found is that a lot of our younger workers have no interest in owning a car. They move into the urban core areas where there's public transportation to allow them to use their money to spend on other things that maybe their wages can't otherwise afford, to be able to invest in their kids' future, to be able to invest in their own retirement, and to be able to afford health care. So one of the things that taxes do is they sound like they're always terrible, but in some cases it's wise to spend it wisely. And I think it's going to be critical that if this sales tax passes, not only for transit but also for education, that we have leaders in the seat that are familiar with budgets, are familiar with being financially responsible, and understand fiscal responsibility. But more importantly, find a balance between making sure that we're taking care of our citizens, as well as opening up the door for economic opportunity for those young folks that are living in our communities and going to school now and wanting to stay in our area.
I couldn't agree more. Because HART, I would not go and use the HART bus system because there's no frequency. It's not very nice. It's not very frequent, and we're not going to change the culture of people using it until it's much more frequent, much more accessible, and nicer. When I was in England last year for Christmas, the buses had Wi-Fi. They were comfortable. There was bathrooms on them. And people from all incomes took it because they made it as a choice. Here, I think people are using HART as a last resort or the only resort.
Yeah, the only frequency that we have that's up to par with other communities is actually, I think, just on Florida and Nebraska Avenue. All the other routes don't have the frequency to require demand. And those that do, those two routes, actually are very well used. People ride those buses because they are frequent. They do actually have some Wi-Fi. And the HART is investing in, thanks to some budget increases that we got approved last year, they are investing in a better fare box so that you could transfer not only among buses comfortably, but also transfer between other modes of transportation. For example, the streetcar, which is an alternative way to get around. It's a smaller venue, but it also serves a smaller area effectively now that they've actually increased the frequency of that service.
So, that's pretty exciting. Is a streetcar what most people would call light rail?
Well, not exactly, but it's close. It is actually a trolley in the sense of what I used to call a trolley, but it does run on rail, and it does move, through a dense urban community at a much slower rate. So it has lots and lots and lots of stops, and it moves through, but it has a smaller audience that it serves. A light rail commuter system actually moves along larger sets of distances say, for example, Wesley Chapel through USF, down through downtown, maybe down to South Tampa, or hopefully in the future over to the West Shore area. That's a spine that's available to us if we were to have the resources to invest in it.
Which we might if we get this passed.
Exactly.
We're going to
create a quick route that actually moves very quickly through those areas and then connects to.
I'm going to interrupt you here real quick.
We're
going to take a quick break to pay for our advertising so we can hear Kimberly Overman, the next county commissioner from Hillsborough. She'll be back after the break. Talk to you in 2 more minutes, Kimberly. Barry Edwards, back after a minute. Welcome back, Barry Edwards, for the afternoon. I will be off tomorrow, but I'll be back on Friday. We are joined by a great civic activist who is a financial planner in the financial planning. She's a certified financial planner, chairman of her own company that she's owned for 20 years, and she's been very active on complex local government organizations like the Hillsborough County Metropolitan Organization, the Tampa Budget and Finance Chair Advisory Committee. She's been a chair of that. She's been a past chair of the Hillsborough County Housing Finance Authority. So she's tackled things that require a little complexity, which is most things in government. When we broke, we were talking about light rail, and you were mentioning the spine. Is that the spine you were talking about, Kimberly Overman, the CSX rails?
Yes. That's a resource that we should capitalize on. It's going to take a lot of work to negotiate with CSX because historically that's taken a bit of an effort. But I think it would be a wise consideration to create that opportunity. The setback is there. And one of the things with any kind of transportation project is you don't want to destroy more than you create when you're creating access for people to get around. And having that available and those setback already there would be a great resource for us to take advantage of.
And so we would just need to either purchase or lease the rail line. Are they using the rail line for anything now, or is it defunct?
Oh, no, it's being used. It does move quite a bit of freight around the community. We have a lot of industrial traffic on it, but it's not of great frequency. I used to live not very far from it. Would hear it travel in the middle of the night, where it travels through to avoid traffic during the day. And trust me, the folks who actually pass them or have to cross them in rush hour are probably thinking there are way too many of them out there. But what's different about a commuter rail is that it moves very, very quickly. So it may take 20 minutes for a freight line on a long train to get through.
Right.
A commuter train moves really quickly. So frequently you're able to avoid having long stays at intersections where the rail meets the road.
So that can be avoided. How fast does a commuter rail or the light rail travel? It's not high speed. It's not like 100 miles an hour, is it?
No, not nowhere near that. But definitely a lot faster than a freight line.
So we would have the revenue which Hart would be the one administering that if this 1 penny tax for transit passed.
What's nice about this pass is it's for, and it sounds like it's forever, but it's really what's needed. The bill itself, or the referendum itself, is for a 30-year period. And one of the advantages of having a 30-year revenue stream, tax revenue stream, is that you can count on it. And as a consequence, you can borrow against that income stream in order to invest resources currently or at a quicker rate than you would to if you paid along the way. Mm-hmm. So what's really nice about having that over a long period of time, it's bondable. So if we needed to invest in either a rail line or a robust set of electric buses, which I'd love to see us move more towards electric buses, which are much more energy efficient and much more friendlier to our environment than our current diesel buses and even the CNG buses, which are what we have moving to now, but it still is not as environmentally friendly. That's going to take a significant amount of capital to do. And so what we want when we know we're going to pay for something is we'd like to be able to take advantage of it.
Right.
And any project like this is going to take some time to develop it's going to take a while to implement. And the more resources we have up front that we can borrow against to make happen, the easier it is to implement the plans that have been studied and developed over the years.
And from what I've talked to you and other folks involved with the transportation industry, is that we have about a 30-year backlog to make up for in Hillsborough County?
Easily.
So this kind of corresponds with that. One of the things you have, I know that you're also kind of very passionate about affordable housing. And one of my clients, Senator Rasan, represents the Brandon Riverview area, which has just massive development. I mean, tens of thousands of houses with 2-lane roads out there. Is there anything we can do about containing sprawl, or is that pony left the barn already?
Well, the pony's already in the barn and running around the corral. We do have a massive amount of homes in an area that we have been behind in building the infrastructure to serve it. That is going to take some reorganization to make happen. You know, transit will help some of that. Even if we were able to widen some of those roads to facilitate transit, that would alleviate a lot of the congestion that we have in those areas. But I think going forward, we're going to have to make sure that we're investing in affordable housing and in smart development, making sure that we're not sprawling to areas that we cannot provide the services currently. And that's the challenge. If we're going to continue developing, and when we have 30 to 60,000 people a year coming to the Tampa Bay area, we can't just stop building.
How many you said, 30 to 50,000?
Yes. That's last year we had 60. The estimates for future growth based on the past trend has been about 30. Now, that should stop if we keep ruining our quality of life. If
right.
we become not competitive by not investing in our infrastructure. But assuming that memo doesn't get out there and we continue to grow, we still have to build housing. We still have to build it in a smart way. And that means create dense communities with smart access, walkable communities that people want to live in, and that where they can easily get to the stores and their doctor's offices and their and their workplace without having to drive all the way across the county or sit in a gridlock trying to get there. And so it means building smarter communities, but it also means investing in areas that are ripe for redevelopment. And we have plenty of those areas in the urban areas. We have, for example, in Temple Terrace, as well as Plant City, as well as in the city of Tampa. Partnering with smart housing land use rules, updating our code to facilitate building infill in a smart way would make sense. And then without that, we're going to find ourselves in a real pickle because we don't have the land code in place to really make that happen easily. And I think it's going to take some strong, smart planning in order to update our code to facilitate the developers that want to build smart houses. And there are developers out there that want to build smart communities. We just have to help them get it done and be much more customer service oriented in the way we deliver services to not only our business owners but also to our citizens. How
on the affordable housing, and this is going to be, and I attack on the show equally as anyone who's listened, the right and the left, and I call on my loony right friends and my loony lefty friends, my limousine liberal friends. In San Francisco, one of them was telling me, we got this, that he didn't want anybody else who didn't make $500,000 a year to move into his neighborhood. And so they had a laundromat, and they designated the laundromat as an historic designation, so you couldn't make it, turn it from a laundromat into a 3 or 4 story apartment. What can we do? I mean, and I see that all even in St. Petersburg trying to do historic designations because everybody likes the property. They don't want their property value to go down in case they're going to sell it or if they're going to move to a condo. But it seems to me it's harder and harder. Senator Rasan has an aide. It's paying $1,100 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment in downtown St. Pete. I mean, I couldn't have afforded that when I was in my 20s.
Oh, we have a serious problem in that area. As many people know, I stayed in the urban community when I moved here because I recognized that we were growing and I can't stand commuting. So I knew what I needed to do. But I moved to the Seminole Heights area 24 years ago. and in an area that needed to be redeveloped, that a lot of people came in and designated historic areas. And then, but we didn't do anything in the business corridors, and we haven't done anything on the roads really to make it easier to get around. So that what we call NIMBY impact,
Right.
not in my neighborhood, I don't want to have that in my neighborhood kind of situation, has to be dealt with up front. Because the way we grow and the way we build smart communities is by recognizing along the way there's going to be changes. Everyone doesn't want to live in a bungalow. Mm-hmm. But everyone wants to live in a walkable community, to the most part, that lives in urban areas.
Right.
Except for those folks that want to live out in the rural area. And there's no reason we should invade either one of those choices by making it all fit in one bucket. Affordable housing is going to have to fit in, and businesses are going to fit in too. One of the things that is important to recognize is, for example, in my community, we didn't want to be called blighted because we might look bad because we were working on restoring our historic area.
Right.
But by turning down a community redevelopment area, we haven't been able to build up our commercial areas to match what's happening in the community. So understanding and being able to explain to not only voters but citizens what that plan looks like and having them participate in the process can actually find solutions that work and can combat that NIMBY, not in my backyard kind of attitude when everyone works together to try and find a compromise solution that works.
So that's why we need leadership like you hopefully will be able to provide us on the county commission. We were talking about education. My clients who are legislators in the Hillsborough area said the number one complaint they get is air conditioning. How did we, and I know the county commission doesn't deal directly with that, but you obviously could be supportive of the tax referendum for the half penny for them. What else can the community of the county commission do to support the school board, which probably has, $2 billion budget, my guess is, in Hillsborough County?
Yeah, they're in a very difficult situation because they haven't paid for much of the maintenance that's necessary, or they didn't budget for that correctly in such a way that they've been able to keep up. Many of our schools were built 25 and 30 years ago. And while we've had, newer schools built in some of our newer communities, many of those schools are still at a point where they need the maintenance that's necessary. And without the tax revenues or without allocating an increase in, say, the millage rate or the things that pay for a school, the school budget is wrestling with doing it well. And that's going to be critically important. There's also costs that aren't going away. We still have to bus our kids from one place to another, and those things haven't gotten any cheaper in the last 20 years. So it is critically important that we invest in our schools so that we can spend the money not only in the infrastructure in the public school system, but also in making sure that our teachers have the tools and the resources they need. When we invest in our students across the board, whether they be on the college track or the technical and trades track, when we build those resources so that our children succeed, our companies succeed and our communities succeed. And that's one of the reasons why it's challenging that we've had two referendums hit at the same time.
Right.
But the reason that's happening is because we haven't had the proper leadership in order to recognize what we've needed to pay for.
Well, I'm going to ask our guest to stay on for just another 10 minutes because this has been so fascinating. And I think I'm going to give you a free plug here. What I like about you is your temperament. You're not shouting at me. You're not talking to me. Or talking at me, you're talking to me. And I think that's the leadership that's been lacking in a lot of these county commission races. We have Kimberly Overman, who is the front runner, by the way, in every single poll. And voting starts in 1 week, as we've talked about, for vote by mail ballots. And we're going to keep her to finish up to have some of her vision of what she would do on the county commission in Hillsborough County. Barry Edwards, back in a minute. Welcome back, Barry Edwards, for the afternoon. And we have been joined by a wonderful public servant from Hillsborough County who is the Democratic nominee. And I know a lot of our listeners in Hillsborough County are Republican. But I know that you all tell me in your emails and tweets that you're reasonable. And I think this is a chance for you to pick a reasonable candidate. Her background is so much stronger than her Republican opponent. But as we've listened and learned on the show so far, she has a detailed understanding of government and the complexities and how to solve it. And we were just recently talking about education. So we get the transit tax, we get the education tax. You're on the county commission. Here's my gotcha question. What are you going to do about the Tampa Bay Rays? I can't believe they want a $900 million stadium. I would send them packing tomorrow, but I know that as an elected official, you can't say that. So
no, I can't say that. It is going to be a challenge trying to address the Rays problem. But moving a stadium from one place that you can't get to another place that you can't get to is not really a good solution, nor is it financially responsible. We do have a backlog of serious challenges that really are quality of life for the people who live in Hillsborough County. But I do recognize there is an opportunity, an economic opportunity of keeping the Rays in the area. I mean, I love baseball, but at the end of the day, we have to prioritize what's important. And if the Rays want to be here and businesses want them to be here and citizens want them to be there, then the individuals that are able, or the businesses and entities that are able to make that happen are going to need to do that without a whole lot of the taxpayers' money, because I don't think we have the bandwidth right now to pay for that. And we do need to be very, very careful about what that cost is. Their deadline is challenging because I think there are ways that we could creatively make an opportunity work. But if it doesn't incorporate jobs and transportation access, full transportation access, including transit, it doesn't actually address some of the housing needs in that area so that the workforce that works at the stadium or in the businesses that are around the stadium can actually live there. We have to recognize where those priorities lie. And at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that our families can survive and take care of their children, can grow their families and live in our community. And if that is out of the reality of making that happen, then we've got to have private enterprise step to the plate and make it happen.
Well, and I've always said that these guys are billionaires, and we had an event at the Poynter Institute with all three owners once, and they were all crying poor mouth, but they're all making tens of millions of dollars. And, I don't see them supporting other businesses like they want other businesses to step up and support them. I think they're a nice thing to have, and if it was a $600 million stadium and they put up $500 million, I could see putting up $100 million or $150 million in infrastructure. But when they want us to pay 75%, I just don't see many citizens talking about, like what you just talked about, that's their priority versus infrastructure and education.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we want to live in safe communities. We want to have gainful employment so we can take care of ourselves and our families. And, and we want to be able to take care of ourselves in the future. There are other things, social services. We've got major challenges in our foster care system and our education system and, with the opioid crisis and a bunch of other things that need attention. So I'm not saying that I don't love baseball and I'd love to see them stay. I would love to see them stay. But as far as government's involvement is concerned and what we are required to do to serve the public, I think the bigger issue is to make sure that we take care of the people who live here in Hillsborough County.
And we only have about 5 minutes left. But one of the big things that I see that McDill is taking steps for, and the city of Tampa obviously just has a $250 million I guess was a bond issue or tax issue to pay for drainage. Climate change, whether it's man-made or cow-made or whatever, it really doesn't matter. The world's getting hotter, and we have a lot of waterfront in Hillsborough County. What can you do to mitigate flooding, or is it beyond our scope?
Well, for starters, as I mentioned earlier, land use and where we build homes and businesses is important. But investing in making sure that we have as much environmental friendly development as possible, and actually investing in resources that don't further damage our county is going to be important. But we do have to be realistic about the impact of sea level rise. In all of the studies that we're shown at the MPO, it is something that we are going to have to deal with, and not, 100 years down the road, 20 years down the road. And so our emergency response times are going to be important. We need to invest in our stormwater management process, and then also look for ways that we can actually work with Mother Nature in terms of where water flows, not build in areas that are environmentally sensitive and expect not to flood. We have to be smarter about the way we've been doing things.
Now, and this is a non-technical, non-scientific. I just see when you have asphalt, the water runs off. But my neighbors who have put bricks without and just had like sand in between, a lot of water seems to be absorbed. Could we do smart things like that at some of these large shopping centers where instead of having just asphalt, you had bricks or some other type of parking lot?
There is technology that we haven't used or required, or we may have actually code to prohibit. I'm not certain about that. But, there is asphalt out there or the type of asphalt that is completely porous so that water will run through it. Anytime you have a hard concrete surface where water is going to pick up speed, you're going to have flooding and you're going to have damage and erosion. So we really do need to look at all of our building standards. I know there's technology out there. I think Hillsborough County needs to start adopting some of those processes and then working with our builders and our developers in looking for ways that they can build smartly. I know there's folks out there that are willing to do it. We just have to help them do it by making sure that the code allows for it, and that's going to be important. Our tree canopy is one of the most valuable things we have in our areas. And when it requires cutting things down at a faster rate than necessary, that can cause a problem. But also recognizing the value of a good mitigation program and making sure it's held accountable for it can be one way to do things. But we have to make sure that our customer service orientation of government service matches the citizens and investors' needs. And when we do better at that, I think we can have a much better outcome, not only in our environmental situation, but also improving our economic opportunity and quality of life.
Well, I think that's captured why I like you and why I'm supporting you, is you talked about citizens and our investors. You talked about the voters and the residents as clients, not just somebody to be told what to do, but to have their quality of life enhanced by government, not just to take money from them.
Yeah, I've had 20 years of practice of being a fiduciary, and that fiduciary means that I have to put my clients first, I have to fully disclose any conflicts of interest, and I have to help that person, whether it's good news or bad, understand the choices they need to make so that they can make smart decisions. That took some practice.
Well, and I think that practice has paid off. I think what we need on the county commission is leadership and people that can tell the truth, and I think that we would get that with Kimberly Overman. So we have enjoyed 3 segments with Kim Overman, who I think will be the next county commissioner. If you're in Hillsborough County, you can start voting in 1 week and vote for my friend and a great leader, Kim Overman. Good luck, and we'll have you back on the show.
Barry. It's Kimberly on the ballot.
Oh, it's Kimberly Overman. I'm sorry.
Kimberly
Overman.
Make sure, because there's another Kim in my race, and you make sure you vote for Kimberly Overman.
Oh, my apologies. Kimberly Overman. Good luck. Barry Edwards back in a minute after the break.